Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate you participating today. It's very encouraging to see everyone that's online here, which really just emphasizes that we have hit a nerve. And boy, there's a bunch of passionate people out there that are interested in solving this election crisis. So this is our third webinar. We have done two weekly webinars so far, this being the third. Just to recap real quickly, my name is Kendall Lang, and I am the CIO for the social media super PAC called Media for America. It's my honor and privilege to present this third webinar. The first webinar was the general introduction and the launch of Media for America. We described our basic premise and principles. There was previously a link sent out to that webinar replay, so there is an archive of that. If you have not seen that, please just go to our website at socialmediasuperpac.com. Last week's webinar, we talked in more detail specifically about a prototype election campaign, and we dissected the competition between an incumbent Democratic candidate and a Republican challenger, and went through that in some detail about the SEO and the social media optimization of both of those campaigns, and how our solution really attempts to address the issues where we believe that conservative candidates are falling down. So as we start today's webinar, again, thank you so much for participating and being passionate about the future of our country. One of the things that we're going to share here today about Media for America is, why are we doing this? What are the ways that we can impact change? And how can we start to shift in what has been a rather discouraging election results? Now, one of the premises, as this article from Technology Spectator talks about, is, will social media really decide elections? Our premise is absolutely that it will. Now, it's not the only component to a strategic digital marketing plan, but it is an absolutely critical one. And you don't have to look any farther than to Australia to look at the 2013 election results for the Premier in Australia to understand what's going on in social media. But let's talk through this in a little more detail. Why do we believe social media is really going to decide elections? When you read a report by Forrester Research, it confirms basically why an investment in social media is mission critical. Basically, you have to understand how voters are getting their information. When was the last time that you opened up a Yellow Pages? When was the last time that you looked at a newspaper ad? When's the last time you sat down at a coffee house and read a physical newspaper? The reality is, out of all the potential arrows in the quiver of marketing that can be done by political campaigns, the number one way that voters are getting connected to information is through search engines and social media. And by far, it's 87% is the way that people are finding information, getting connected to the issues, researching issues, or discovering where their candidates stand, or even who are the candidates. So there's a pretty good reason why to invest in social media. Again, it's not at the expense of all other marketing channels, but it's the number one way, so why wouldn't you have an investment in there? And that's our premise as a social media super PAC, that the conservative candidates and the Republican Party at large have completely missed the boat in terms of social media. So our executive summary and our goal, to restate what I've emphasized in the first two weekly webinars, we want to build a conservative alternative to what exists today as the liberal big data social media machine. I'm going to give you a couple of instances for that, but today's focus is I'm going to go very quickly through these agenda items to get to the meat of the conversation today. Now, as a review of our executive summary, our belief is there has to be an overarching national strategic digital marketing plan. There currently isn't one, and I'll show you how the Democrats are doing it and what the Republican response is and where we're missing the boat. But there has to be this national strategic plan, and that's what we're proposing to architect. We are in the process now. We have tools available, and we're going to continue to build tools to accumulate big data. Now, big data is a super hyped phrase right now. A lot of people don't even understand what that means, but it's part of what we're addressing in terms of social media, gathering information, identifying voters' interests, and then applying that to local congressional candidates on a continuing basis. So we have already constructed what we call our election win playbook. Now, this playbook outlines the major factors for a strategic digital marketing plan that can be deployed on a local basis for all congressional districts. Now, the point of having this election win playbook is to be able to educate, equip, and engage local volunteers. Our belief is that you have to use volunteers using the technology in order to motivate, inspire, educate and train, collaborate and measure, engage, honor, reward, and then celebrate. So that is a critical part that we are not suggesting to go away from local volunteers. They are absolutely critical, but you have to equip them with the information, the messaging, the issues that are specific to their local district, and then you have to equip them with the tools and able to be more effective and more efficient with the distribution of that information. Now, with all of those things around it, it's absolutely imperative, and the majority of what I'm going to be talking about today is identifying center point issues on which we can swing voters. So I'm going to go into a little bit of background about what center point issues are and how to implement them in a specific targeted campaign. Now, to back up and to put this in monetary context, the 2012 election campaign, Barack Obama for America, they spent $1.7 billion. Out of that, about $100 million of it was social media. So that gives you an idea that social media is a big deal, okay? Mitt Romney came nowhere close to spending that kind of money. I think the estimates were between 4.4 and 4.5 million on social media spend. So it's a big deal, and Republican, conservative, constitutional candidates are not in the mix. Now, the good news is this: I'm very encouraged. I am excited, again, about the number of people participating in these weekly webinars. I'm excited about the passion. I think it's absolutely phenomenal that all of you are getting the message about focusing on solutions, because I know everybody, just like you, I am tired of focusing on the problems. I've heard enough, and people have heard it enough from me. People are sick and tired of hearing me complain about the problems, right? So I imagine the same thing exists for you, that people do not want to hear the problems anymore. They know what those problems are. We don't need to focus on those. We have to shift our thinking, and we have to focus on solutions. So I'm going to go through a little bit of identifying the problem here and talking through this. I'm going to present the solution. I'm going to be talking about how you can engage for action, and just understand that we have solutions for every step of the election cycle. Now let's talk about identifying the problem. In order to focus on solutions, you have to know what's wrong, right? You can't fix things unless you know they're broken. So for me, as a software engineer, truth resides in the data. So let's look at some of the data and talk about what's going on out there. First of all, history leaves clues, right? Just like success, history leaves a trail. At the highest level, Republicans have been outspent on social media by at least 5-1. And it's not just Facebook and Twitter, right? So this is about the comprehensive approach to all of social media, and it's not just Facebook and Twitter. And what I talk about is an example of, do you know your clout score? Do you even know what clout is? If you go to klout.com, do you know what your score is, and do you know what it represents? Well, bottom line is, clout is the Nielsen rating of social media, and it scores individuals, bands, celebrities, politicians, basically anybody on the web that has a social media presence. It takes all of their social media activity and ranks it and creates a score from 0 to 100. Well, the number one ranked individual on clout is Barack Obama at 99, and this was his score at the time of the 2012 elections. Now, my clout score at the time of the elections was 62. Okay, the very same time frame, Mitt Romney's score was 45. Okay, if I have a better clout score than the Republican presidential candidate, there is a huge social media problem. That's what we're addressing with Social Media SuperPAC. How do you close that gap between what the Democrats are already doing versus what the Republicans are not doing? So it's absolutely critical to understand how social media is revolutionizing the political landscape. Part of the problem is that most candidates are completely unaware of the social media machine and the big data from the Democratic National Committee that is about to trounce them again. Now, we had some good news from a Tea Party perspective in the 2010 midterm elections, but 2012 was absolutely devastating. The problem is the Democrats are going after the midterm elections in 2014, and their goal is not only to retain the Senate, but it's to gain control of the House. And can you imagine what's going to happen if Barack Obama has the last 2 years of his second term unfettered and unchecked by the Republican House? It would be an absolute disaster, even more so than it is right now. So our focus is on the 2014 midterm elections and waking up the Republican Party and constitutional conservatives to educate them what's going on and what they're going to have to do to reverse the cycle of losing elections. So let me go into some background on what our premise is as a social media super PAC. So as a software engineer, I deal with mathematics a lot. There's a mathematical theory called bounded set. Bounded set theory is basically a concept that allows an understanding of what numbers belong to a group or a set. So a bounded set describes a group of things with a clear in and out definition of membership. So in my world of search engine optimization and the services that we provide for our clients in terms of social media activity and search engine ranking, Google, as the 800-pound gorilla in search engine, has an algorithm, which is a calculus formula, where they calculate the ranking of every website on the planet. They do that through a very sophisticated mathematical calculus formula that I show here in generics. Now, if anybody tells you they know exactly what Google's formula is, they'd be lying to you. But what we've been able to do is through our network of reference websites, we have over 200 websites that we monitor and basically reverse engineer so that we can come up with this algorithm, and we know the various components of how Google calculates website ranking and the indexing that they do for search results. Now, this all represents everything inside the parentheses represents a bounded set. So everything in that bounded set is included in the calculation. So everything from page ranking to Facebook scores to off-site factors to linking things, all of those are incorporated into this search algorithm. So that's what bounded set theory is, right? So if you think about the history of the world, everything from government to religion to capital markets or banking to military have all been defined around the bounded set theory. Now, what we're talking about is changing our perspective and applying the alternative of bounded set theory, which is center point theory, and applying that to the social dynamics of the political mindset. Now, the centered set does not limit membership to preconceived boundaries, so there's no in or out. Instead, a centered set is conditioned on a center point, or what we call the center point issue, about things we have in common. So compared to bounded set, where you have to believe like I believe, if you want to be part of the Democratic Party, they have a very established platform that you have to buy into to be a part of the Democratic Party. Same thing with the Republican Party. Same thing with the church you belong to. The same thing with the city government that you participate in. You have to believe like I believe if you want to be part of that group. What we're saying in political elections of the future, they will be swung by focusing on center set issues. The reality is, do you care about what I care about? And can we agree on those center set issues? And can I swing voters based on that single center set issue? And that, in fact, is the premise of what we're focusing on, which is there's a lot of evidence, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of history that shows how center set issues have determined electoral outcomes. That's the basis of our defining for you how we're approaching the swing voters. Now, when we talk about constitutional center points, I believe that you don't have to go far afield to every social issue out there. So I'm just highlighting here just the first 5 amendments, which is the first 10 amendments to the Constitution are considered the Bill of Rights. Obviously, there's Amendments 11 through 27, which are also equally important, but I'm just focusing on the first 5 to say, if we can just reach agreement around these fundamental things and delineate the issues around things like freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom to keep and bear arms, which is, gun rights versus gun control. And that's actually one of the issues that I'm going to focus in on here today, is the constitutional center point of the right to bear arms. So these are things that our belief is, if we can focus on the center set issues of freedom of speech, there are many instances where people will absolutely rally around freedom of speech and they will drop their bounded set parameters. They will focus on the center set, and regardless of party, if they believe that freedom of speech is being impinged on, they will take steps to protect the right to freedom of speech. So this is what we're talking about in terms of constitutional center points. Now, let's set the framework as we drill down into the specific election and the specific center point issue that we're going to explain today in more detail what this means. You have to look at the big picture. So 2014, the Democrats are very clear. And there's a quote in the New York Times that I quoted in the very first webinar, which says, look, make no mistake, Obama is all about the 2014 midterms. So they are coming after it hard and heavy, and this is just a summary here of the 33 U.S. Senate seats that are up for election. Now, out of those, 20 are currently held by Democrats and 13 held by Republicans. If we can hold the Republican incumbent seats and change 10, we can absolutely take control of the Senate. And I believe that's totally possible. I believe it's totally achievable. And I believe there's a lot of data that supports that. But it requires a strategic, coordinated plan in order to accomplish the goal of winning these elections. Now, let's look at the House for a second. Every single one of the 435 seats in the House is up for election. Now, done right, we can not only keep the seats that we have, but we can actually make a substantial inroads into the Democratic Party and the seats that they hold, because there are some specific issues, there are specific candidates, and there's a momentum of things going on where we could significantly increase the advantage that we have in the House. Now, let's talk about some of the things that are going on. At the national party level, I find it really discouraging that the Democratic Party takes the lead and has their coordinated programs instead of the Republican Party coming out in a proactive, definitive, creative way, coming up with their own programs. They come up with programs to respond to the Democratic National Committee. So here you can see we have the Jumpstart program for the DCCC, which is providing early candidate support. That's a clearly defined program. The National Republican Campaign Committee has a response to that, which is called the Patriot Program. Then there's the DCCC Frontline Program. That's designed for specific support at the national level to help vulnerable incumbents. And there's a list of these published, and if you want to find those out, it's easily Googleable. So you can just type in the keyword Jumpstart Program or type in the keyword Frontline Program, and you can find out all about it. They list the ones that they think are vulnerable. And then there's the National Republican Target Response List to go after those vulnerable incumbents. Now, one of the things that the DC has put in place that there is no response from the National Republicans is what's called Blue Tide. Okay, this is the super especially vulnerable incumbents like Scott Peters in the 52nd Congressional District, who the Democrats know is vulnerable, and they do not want to lose that seat. So they have codenamed their activity Blue Tide, and this is where OFA, which is previously Obama for America, now converted to Organizing for Action, is coming in and providing special support to these vulnerable incumbents to bring this social media machine that Obama has built to bear for vulnerable candidates. Now, we're going to drill down, and if you look at all of these lists and you research those, the Illinois 2nd Congressional District is not on either one of those lists. It's not on anybody's radar screen. Part of that is because the Democrats believe that it is a Democratic stronghold, and there's good reason for them to feel that way. No Republican has won that seat in over 50 years. So we're going to use this as an example to clearly delineate the value and the impact of what we believe can happen when you efficiently and effectively incorporate social media into your campaign strategies. Now, I want to take just a minute and talk about the Obama campaign. It was and is repeatable and scalable. They have had consistent branding, consistent messaging, consistent volunteer participation. And as I said before, what was Obama for America has now been rebranded into a massive political movement called Organizing for Action, which conveniently takes advantage of the OFA brand, thereby making it reusable. Now, they've taken all the tools, all the knowledge, all the networks, the technology, and most importantly, all the volunteers who are still together post-election, and they're out there on a daily basis fighting and communicating and messaging to enact the president's agenda now and for generations to come. I mean, if you have subscribed to any of the Democratic social media messaging platforms, you would be inundated and you'd be amazed. If you haven't seen this, you should become very familiar with it because they have a massive messaging machine that they are constantly messaging through the social networks about issues like the Obamacare fight or the government shutdown or immigration reform. And these messages basically go unanswered by the Republican Party. So this is part of what we intend to change. Now let's talk about Democratic strongholds. There are 47 districts with a partisan divide where there is a 70% to 30% favor of the Democrats. There are only 23 similar types of districts that exist on the Republican side. So there's more than a 2-to-1 advantage in just the districts that have a huge partisan divide. Now, of 16 districts where the partisan divide is 80% to 20% or more, the Democrats control 15 of them. Now, one of those is the Illinois 2nd Congressional District, which is why the Democrats believe that this is a stronghold. They do not believe that there's anything that they need to do. They just assume that it's going to be a Democratic win. We're going to change that. So let's talk about the special election for the 2nd Congressional District. If you remember what I talked about in terms of center point versus bounded set theory, the last special election, which was just the beginning of this year when Jesse Jackson Jr. Resigned his seat prior to being convicted, there was a special election. That special election was focused on a center point issue of gun control. So as most of you probably heard in the news, Jesse Jackson resigned his seat. Initially, it was represented as health concerns that quickly evolved into criminal activity, which he's now, both he and his wife have now been convicted, and so there was a special election. Now let's talk about the congressional district just for a minute. This district is based in Cook and Will counties. For those of you who might be geographically challenged, this district includes the south suburbs of Chicago, extending slightly into Will County and down into the city's far southeast side. It's basically 184 square miles, which basically says this is one of the smallest districts in the country and the 7th smallest in Illinois. Okay, so this is a very defined target geographic location that is a localized, very specific demographic makeup. Now, as I said earlier, from a historical perspective, there has not been a Republican win in this congressional seat in over 50 years. But from 2000 until 2012, you can see that it was an 80% plus up until 2012. It was 80% plus of the total vote going to Jesse Jackson. Now, there was a special election held to fill that vacancy, and let's talk about that for just a second. Again, the center point issue that came out of this was guns and gun control. Now, Robin Kelly at the time was the unheard of Democratic candidate. She was not estimated to be in the mix at all, and she ended up coming out of nowhere and winning for some very specific reasons. The number one reason was because of the backing that she had, the social media that she had, and the support that she had to differentiate her as a gun control advocate compared to her primary Democratic competitor, who was positioned as a gun rights, NRA-supported candidate. So gun control came to the forefront in this race with a very negative TV ad targeting Debbie Halverson, who at the time was the front runner as the Democratic candidate. But they really focused on her prior voting record with respect to guns. They positioned her as the NRA candidate, which again is the polar opposite to what good progressive liberals want to project in terms of gun control. Now, what's interesting is that the ads for this negative campaign came from Mayor Michael Bloomberg's SuperPAC, Independence USA. That SuperPAC spent $1.3 million in the special election to get their candidate elected. Right? That is twice the amount spent by the top candidates combined. Now, the reason I'm pointing to this is that I believe that we have a huge opportunity to focus on supporting Black conservatives in a Black congressional district, teaching gun rights, gun advocacy, and not gun control. Now, the question is going to be how powerful a message and how deep are you going to have to go to win this seat? And you're going to have to go really deep with a very carefully crafted, thoughtfully and articulately crafted message that's going to become immersed in the local community, and it has to be presented by conservative Black voices who can be trusted by the local constituents. That is completely possible, and that's how we're going to win this seat. So the question is educating the constituents with this message, with the right spokespeople, and identifying the right volunteers to help carry that message to the local constituents to let them know that they have been misinformed and not educated with the true history about gun rights. So one of the things that we're exploring, we've sent out a preliminary request for cooperation, not only with the NRA, but importantly with the NRA. And what we've said to them is, look, we have the technology and the plan to provide kind of this orchestral score to make this a reality, but we're going to need help not just of the NRA, but other groups with content. So there are a lot of organizations out there that have tons of content around what the reality of the history is for Black conservatives and how Blacks have been misinformed about the history of gun rights and gun control. And we need support from a content and messaging standpoint that's already been crafted so that the message that we send out using our technology and our tools is getting out to the people that need to hear it. And again, it's based on the truth of Black history and gun control, which will be carried and shepherded by local Black conservatives. So there's a lot of resources, and if you get a chance, everybody participating in this webinar today will get a link to the archive of this. So you'll be able to find this slide and be able to link to it. But there is a lot of really good, high-quality content that makes the case for gun rights in predominantly Black communities. And I would just encourage you to, on your own, go look at some of this information so that you understand the power of the messaging that we're talking about that can absolutely change the outcomes and put constitutional conservatives into Democratic strongholds. Now, why Illinois? Okay. So the premise is if we can get a constitutional conservative elected in this district of all districts, we can absolutely influence outcomes everywhere. Okay? I don't want an easy win. I want the hardest win out there. I want to beat the Democrats in their stronghold. I want to tear down the fortresses of the bastions of Democratic left-leaning progressive liberals and show them that people care, right? That truth matters. And from my perspective, if you don't plan to win it, don't even try. So we're going big, and we're going big data, social media, or we're going home. Because, again, my belief is go big or go home. So this is why we're focusing on the 2nd Congressional District. We're focusing on places where the traditional Republican conservatives are looking at places where they think they can win. I'm focusing on places where I think I can get to the heart of the matter and change the hearts and minds of the local constituents based on a single center set issue of gun rights. Now, why are we doing this? Just to recap, in the webinar 1 and 2, we talked about Colorado's first ever legislative recall, center point issue. We talked about Andy Vidic's surprise win in California. Again, center point issue, immigration reform. We talked about the Congressional District in California, where Scott Peters is the vulnerable Democratic incumbent. Center point issue there, character. Special election for mayor. There's other elections going on where you can, congressional district by congressional district, city by city, county by county, state by state, you can identify the center point issues that are most important to the local constituents. And they're all going to be different, and you have to develop a mechanism to communicate the messaging to them so that we can avoid what happened in 2012, which was obviously the loss. That, again, if you look at the loss and understand what happened, the predominant issue from a center point, center set issue standpoint was that 30 million Christians sat out the vote because they perceived Mormonism to be a cult. Now, I'm not arguing whether it is or isn't. I'm just saying the Democrats successfully took that center point issue and convinced, a huge block of the Christian vote to not vote for Romney. And in that, they were successful at getting Obama elected. So focusing on this scenario, I don't ever want to feel again like I felt the night of the presidential elections in 2012. I am sick and tired of losing. There is no reason that we must lose anymore. We have the messaging, we have the tools, we have the technology, and that's what we're standing for, is the solutions to help us win elections. So let me talk about the laser focus on what's required to create election-winning solutions. Now, it's not just about technology or tactics, but it's an overall strategy. Now, remember that I said this has to be an overarching national strategic plan where we can inspire, educate, and engage. It's not just technology, but if we're going to truly try and leapfrog the Democratic strongholds, we have to do it better, faster, more efficient, in order to achieve the desired objective. Now, there's an exciting new opportunity for us to win elections. But you have to ask the question, what is the conservative answer to start winning elections? It's not rocket science, but it is science. So it all rests on, if you evaluate the data, understand what's happened historically, identify what's required moving forward. That's what we're presenting, is a gap analysis of what's gone wrong in the elections and what do we have to do to fix that. Now, one of the keys when we're applying our technology is focusing on, you always have to have, now content has been, is now, always will be, of course, king. Everybody knows that axiom. But from our standpoint, content also has to be keyword rich, highly relevant. It has to be issue specific. It has to be active, current, and ongoing. It has to be repetitive and consistent. And it has to be broadly distributed. So those components to content are foundational to what we use the technology for, which is content distribution. Now, just as some history, what started, okay, if you think back to 2006, when Barack Obama first became a senator, really wasn't on anybody's radar screen. This is back when YouTube was just getting started, Google was just emerging, and MySpace was the first social media site to come out in 2007 with 100 million members. Okay, it was a pretty simple world back then. Well, that's evolved into a social media clutter that has turned into literally hundreds of sites. I mean, we know of over 1,000 social media sites that are grouped by different categories. Anything that you could possibly think of, there's a social media network for it. Now, we're tracking 350 social media networks that have more than 1 million members. Now, there may be some logos on this slide for companies and for social media sites that you've never even heard of. And that's kind of the whole point, is that there is information overload, and as a single individual or as a single campaign candidate, it's overwhelming, and it can absolutely be confusing. If you're not confused now, just dig into this a little bit more and it will become confusing pretty quickly. So what we've done is create a software solution that allows us to organize and efficiently distribute content to all of these social media sites that you could never do manually. The beauty of what we've put in place is the efficient, effective distribution of content to all of these categories, whether it's social media video sharing sites or photo sharing sites or professional career sites like LinkedIn or Names or Plaxo, or whether it's news sharing sites or blogging sites. I mean, whatever the category, we are tracking them. We are connected with the API so that on behalf of our clients, we establish a social media account at each one of these sites. And if you just think about the logistics of it, how long would it take you to go to each one of these sites, create your username and password, log in, add your picture, add multiple pictures, and then every week come in at least once a week and post one article or one bit of information to each of these websites? It's a monumental Herculean task, and the only way to do this efficiently is through software. So 4 years ago, we created the software to accomplish this objective. Now, we've been successfully deploying it for commercial clients on a geographically concentrated basis, and my frustration of not winning elections, I said, okay, they're just not doing the kind of things that we're doing commercially. So applying this technology to the commercial, from the commercial world to the political world seemed like a natural because nobody was doing it. Now, why do we do this? Well, if you understand the search engine ranking algorithms and how information is ranked, one of the major components, if you go back to the calculus formula that I showed you for Google's search engine algorithm, is how many links that they recognize to your website. Now, this page is a snapshot of a Google Webmaster Tools, which is a publicly available free tool that you can sign up for yourself. If you haven't done it on your own website, I definitely encourage you to do it. But what this shows is the links to a site that we created for one of our clients that shows in less than 5 months, we were able to achieve over 4,000 inbound links to this website that are all recognized by Google. So you can see here that the majority of them are out in social media sites like WordPress or ThinkLocal or Weebly.com. And if you dove into over 800 of the domains that are linking in here, you'd find a good percentage of them are social media sites. So this is part of why we do this, because having the distribution creates recognized links that not only get you distribution in the social media sites, but it also impacts your search engine optimization. So behind that technology, there's a reason for doing this. Our goal is to use that technology to educate and mobilize local volunteers. So let's talk about that for just a minute. This solution is actually really simple. As I said at the beginning, there needs to be an overarching strategic plan that helps guide the implementation of a national education and training strategy that can provide the top-down balancing solution for a bottom-up alternative to what is right now a lopsided platform favoring the big government agenda. Again, what we're presenting as the solution to close this gap is an efficient and effective technology that combines with the training of local volunteers who are going to get us there. Now, again, this is not technology for the sake of technology. This is technology with a purpose to accomplish the goal of equipping and engaging volunteers to get eyeball to eyeball, belly button to belly button, because there is no substitute in the relationship process for having that human interaction. But getting to it quicker, more effectively, is the beauty of social media distribution. Now, our approach and the election win playbooks that we've created are repeatable, reusable, and scalable. So our Media for America campaign and each one of the local campaigns is going to be consistent in branding, consistent in messaging, and consistent in participation, so that the media positioning that we're doing, right, the keyword focus that I've talked about, all the social media accounts that we set up on behalf of our messaging, the network of what we call long-lived content is going to be owned and controlled by the SuperPAC, so that it's not just single election cycle dependent. It's not going to be tied to one brand name of one candidate. It's going to be repeatable and scalable for subsequent election cycles, so that the information we gather from election year to election year and in between years becomes very valuable, very powerful to keep in touch with the constituency and to focus on how all of this is happening. So in closing, I go back to the question from the original. Will social media really decide elections? The way that I want to look at this is it's only going to get there if you engage, right? What motivates you to stand up? For me, it's all about winning. for me, it seemed very clear that the social media revolution really is impacting how elections are being won. So from my standpoint, the election crisis can be solved if you understand how to incorporate and utilize the social media marketing strategies that we've talked about. So the question really is, what portion of your life are you willing to contribute? Now, if you have any questions, you can go to the website, socialmediasuperpac.com. You can call us at a toll-free number, which is 866-347-3321. And I just want to leave you with one final thought here, that the life that we talk about is really an acrostic where L stands for labor, I stands for influence, F is for finances, and E is for expertise. Not everybody has the ability to contribute finances, particularly in this economy. Not everybody has expertise, right? But everybody has the ability to put in labor. And part of this solution is figuring out, where are you going to stand? What portion of your life are you going to contribute to this solution? So I want to pause for just a minute, and I'm going to open up the microphone, and I'm going to let Mike Owen say a couple of closing comments, and then we'll open it up for questions. Mike, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
All right, very good. I'm going to observe that, today's news is all dominated by the government slow-down or slim-down, as you choose to characterize it. And I'm thinking that the debate on this issue is still relatively early, and it both can and likely will become far more serious as we approach the October 17th deadline for extending the debt ceiling. Times like this, I always make a point of talking to my friends and watching the media a little more closely, and based on that, let me offer a few brief observations here. We hear the words impasse and Congress is broken everywhere. I hear it in the media, I hear it from my friends. And I would like to observe that the system is not broken and that this is democracy at work. And if I could speak to the president, I would say something to this effect. Mr. President, this is not a farce, and it is not a small branch of government obstructing process for political gain, but rather, these are the voices of the people, and this is a very good and contemporary example of the checks and balance system created by our founding fathers. This is democracy at work, and it's probably very hard to understand that in different places around the world. I've also noticed a rather consistent pattern in conventional media. If you watch the nightly news, the people there interview the leaders of both parties, but normally it's the Republicans first, the Democrats second, so the Democrats get the last word, and then it's immediately switched to a human interest story, basically interviewing someone on the street who's complaining about the impasse and the deadlock, or some article about a federal employee who's terribly inconvenienced. And the one that really struck me was the annual elk meeting in Yellowstone National Park and how people would not be able to visit that. What is not being discussed is the root basis of how we got here. Also notice the president being interviewed and his very consistent use of the I and my pronouns, as if this were just about him. The real message and substance is being lost in all of this, of course. We forget how all of this started. When the Democrats controlled both houses of Congress, and health care legislation was rammed down our throat and became Obamacare. This pattern continues. I suggest that what's going on right now is a classic case in point of what we're talking about here. This could well become a windfall for the Democratic Party, and they will predictably exploit it in a number of ways. And what I'm observing in the media is not an accidental pattern. It's a very fair bet here that there's a lot of orchestrated chatter in social media. The Democratic Party has very extensive emails, and there's got to be a lot of communication there. And what is going to be suggested here coming into the 2014 midterm elections is we can prevent this problem from ever happening again. Let's fire the Republicans elected to the House of Representatives and to the Senate. Let's replace them with Democrats. We'll never have to deal with this again. This is a classic time where we need to deploy this kind of technology. And I close my comments here by saying something I said the first time I was on. Social media, as Kendall has so effectively pointed out, is the most effective communication medium of our time. and it is most effective when driven right down to the local voter. As I live in Southwest Washington, I have a Republican congressman that represents me and my fellows here. I haven't heard a word. You need to get this technology out to establish communications. We need to get real debate that focuses on the issues, and the alternative is a losing prescription for next year's elections. Done, Kendall.
Mike, thank you very much, and I want to thank everybody for participating. In our 2 other previous weeks' webinars, we did allow time for question and answers, but due to some other constraints, we're not going to take questions in today's webinar. But please stay tuned for next week's webinar, where we will again be addressing issues specific to the 2014 midterm elections. I want to thank you all very much for participating, and again, just very excited with everybody's involvement here, and very happy to see the passion and the commitment and the participation of everybody. And again, thank you so much for participating, and we'll talk to you again next week.